This is a Socialist News and Views debate.
I'm Nick Schillingford, coming to you from the Urban Cabin Studios in South Minneapolis with this, our first debate. Should working people support the Democratic Party? A note, this debate is being recorded on February 1st and will be released on February 6th. You know, this is a discussion and a debate. I think it should be friendly. I think we've been friendly so far in the pre-discussion, and obviously we have some disagreements on lots of things that are crucial to the movements, to the grassroots organizing that we're doing, and ultimately, one big part of the questions of building movements, building power is should working people support the Democratic Party, and that's our discussion today. I imagine there's potentially strong perspectives on that among everybody here, but I think it can be a positive, comradely discussion and debate. I think, people think, well, certain politics could be dangerous. It could lead our struggle in the wrong direction. But ultimately, I think everybody on this call has, I'll personally vouch that they want to see a successful society that, doesn't trample on people's rights, meets people's needs, has a dignified life for working and poor people. So I think we should give each other the benefit of the doubt. And that, we may feel others have drawn the wrong conclusion, but I think we're starting from the place of being committed to building a better world for everyone. So without much further of ado, and without me, rambling on, let's just have folks introduce themselves, starting with Sam.
Sure. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me and everyone else on here. My name is Samuel Doten, or Sam. I use the pronouns he, him, his, or they, them, their. And I have been very active in the Democratic Party and held various roles in the DFL party here in Minnesota since 2017. And I got into this work. I started as, I'd done some issue activism when I was in college. And then when Bernie Sanders' campaign came around, I was fired up. I was excited. And it was the first time I took an active interest in electoral politics in particular, rather than doing work on issues on my campus, or sometimes going to the Capitol to lobby for certain legislation. And I joined the Stonewall DFL Caucus, which is the LGBTQ caucus of the Minnesota DFL party. And for listeners who aren't familiar, DFL is an acronym for Democratic Farmer and Labor Party. It was a merger of left-wing Farmer Labor Party and a more centrist Democratic Party out of the Great Depression era. And I was on the board of Stonewall for about 6-7 years, including serving 2 years as chair of the caucus. And I got to see up close and personal the inner mechanics and machinery of the Democratic Party here in Minnesota. I went in with very low expectations and hopes. And what I found is that you get what you organize for. And I was able to lead and organize an influx of young progressive folks, trans folks, people of color into the caucus to completely remake the board of directors and make it from a caucus that really upheld and apologized for establishment politics into a group that was actively agitating and pushing, including working directly with hundreds of candidates over my tenure, running as DFL candidates to educate and really push them to take strong, bold, progressive stances. I also joined DSA around this time in 2017, like a lot of folks, although I was one of those quote unquote paper members who didn't do much. I paid my dues. I went to maybe a membership meeting every 2 years or so, read the emails. And it's more recently in the last year or two that I started to get quite active within our Twin Cities DSA chapter here. Throughout the time, I've held a variety of positions within the DFL party, sometimes much to the disliking of more establishment-oriented folks in the party. And I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2020 to the Democratic National Convention. And it was a group of the Minnesota delegates for Bernie We had a discussion when we had sort of our one chance to get together that year with COVID going around. And we wanted to keep this movement going and not just let it be a passing thing attached to a single candidate, but to institutionalize the left in the DFL. And so we formed the Democratic Socialist Caucus. We had an explosion of growth and interest in this caucus. And I think in some ways it was an answer to those who didn't see a lot of prospect for DSA scaling up its efforts or weren't so comfortable with the swearing off of working with the Democratic Party. And there's been some ups and downs. We pursued becoming an official caucus with the DFL party and were pretty harshly swatted down. And that was led by one Ken Martin, chair of the DFL, who just today was elected as chair of the DNC. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And we had, but this infrastructure really manifested some success this last year within the DFL party, especially at the state convention, which took place over the last days of May into June 1st of 2024, where we were able to successfully pass a well-worded ceasefire resolution to become part of the DFL party's platform, and also fix some of the wording around the resolution around anti-Semitism that removed references to supporting the state of Israel. And in general, we're building a different center of gravity and a better culture for folks who are socialists and on the left and progressives generally who don't buy into the go along and get along attitude, which tends to co-opt and consume so many people who touch the Democratic Party. And I also serve as the treasurer of the Minneapolis DFL party as well. That keeps me a little busy with some meetings, and Minneapolis DFL is kind of a nexus of like left versus center fighting with each other in Minneapolis. You know, we're a one-party town, and increasingly this country isn't even a two-party system, but it's two sets of one-party systems that are briefly touching basically in the suburbs. And that's a little bit about me and where I've been. And overall, I'm a person, while I'm a committed democratic socialist, I tend to reject dogmatism and rigidity and care a lot more about sort of what are our goals, what can we accomplish, and what can we organize folks strategically towards getting those. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion that we're having today. And I'm looking forward to having my views challenged. Personally, I don't claim to have the answer, but what I do have is an answer, which I've been testing and refining over time. And so I'm looking forward to submitting this to you all for consideration, and looking forward as well to hearing alternative perspectives with regard to the Democratic Party.
Thanks. Penelope?
Yes, hi. My name is Penelope Mace. I live in Winona, Minnesota. I've only been here 1 year. So I'm very old. I'm the oldest person here. And I was what they call a red diaper baby, okay? Raised by old lefties, pretty much absorbed Marxism and a class analysis with my pablum. My mother used to take me to various events having to do with the civil rights movement and the ban the bomb movement, like way back in the day. I got involved with SDS back in the day, and although it was SDS when they had sort of moved off campuses and were trying to do community organizing, I didn't get involved in it in college. I did run with the Weatherman faction of SDS for a while, which is rather infamous, and people have probably heard of it. I spent 3.5 months in Cuba as part of the very first Venceremos Brigade. And that was a very, it was life-changing in a sense. I mean, I was already a committed, Marxist, Leninist, and so on, but it was really life-changing to kind of actually see a socialist country. And we traveled all over as I say, we were there 3.5 months. So it wasn't like some silly tourist, thing of, in and out in a week or something. We really went to workplaces and colleges and all over and talked to all kinds of people. And we were not supervised. We were free to roam around and just talk to people. So it was really amazing. And then I kind of, I met Workers' World Party in New York City, which it's still around, although it's very tiny, a Marxist-Leninist party. And they were influential as well for me in terms of tactical and strategic kinds of issues. They're very good on that sort of thing, very good. So since then, I've kind of been in and out because of raising a family and doing various other things. But at this point, here in Winona, I've met some people, some lefties here. I did work on the Harris campaign here in Winona. In fact, I did more door knocking or whatever they call it than any other volunteer. They gave me a little award. It's like 350 or something in the town. And so, but now, you know what? I'm really trying to find some more sort of solidly left-wing people. I have found a few with an eye towards, getting some kind of a united front to fight basically Trumpism, sort of under the banner of like, let's unite, let's stop Project 2025. Something on that order. I mean, I'm not married to that, but I mean, that's kind of what came to me, and something like that, because I don't know what else to do at this point, to be honest. I'm just kind of like sitting here trying not to feel overwhelmed every day and trying not to feel really defeated and depressed, because half the people I know have sort of retreated into watching reruns of BBC mysteries and are not even watching the news or picking up a newspaper because they're so dismayed by what's going on, So I'm really looking forward to this, to hear some ideas, try and catch some enthusiasm from you young folks, and so I can move on and maybe, impart a little energy here.
Thanks, Penelope. Tracy?
Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank you, Nick, for having me here. This is the second time I think you've invited me to be on your show, and I appreciate it. My name is Tracy. I live in the lovely city of Indianapolis, Indiana, which I always love to call the Texas of the North. I'm not sure. I don't have as much political experience as everyone else here. I know I'm involved with the Justice for All party that's forming, because the Democrats literally make me sick. The Republicans I don't pay attention to because they're MAGA. So I come from a tradition. My family was not political at all. We had to drag my mother to vote for the first time when she was in her late 40s. She voted for the first time. So my family is not political at all. But I'm more into social activism. Organized a Medicare for All March, which we're doing this year. Looking to connect to people about getting reparations for African descendants of slavery. That's a very, very important issue to me. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot today. I am kind of a chameleon. In other words, I'm part conservative and I'm part liberal, if that makes any sense. There are some issues I'm definitely going to be leaning more towards the right, not in terms of right fascism, but in terms of religious beliefs or that type of thing. And then on the other hand, politically, I'm definitely a leftist. I definitely believe in Medicare for all, free college, guaranteed housing, guaranteed working, those type of things. So I am glad to be here.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, so like I mentioned, there's a couple people that aren't on the call right now. One is definitely not going to be on, and we're hope the other one will come back or get on shortly. Well, where I wanted to start, shortly after the election, Politico had an article that was November 10th. It had the title, "More Democrats fear the party's image isn't just damaged, it's broken," end quote. And Ralph Nader announced in his journal that he's putting out now, quote, "This is a collapse of the Democratic Party," end quote. is the Democratic Party broken? Has it collapsed, or is it collapsing? I want to start with Samuel. You're inside. You've got your hands in at least the DFL here in Minnesota. Is the Democratic Party collapsing?
I love this question because the answer is yes and no. It kind of depends on what you mean by the Democratic Party. So I'll start there. Just since we're talking about the Democratic Party, I think it's important to define terms of what we mean by it. And this is something I encourage a lot of folks on the left to think about and educate themselves about, because it's really easy to say the Democrats, the Democratic Party, and that's kind of an amorphous thing. There's a lot of things that are part of that. So I'm going to unpack that. I have a lot of experience working with the formal structure of the Democratic Party. So this is my Senate District Committee, the DFL State Central Committee. I forgot to mention this in my introduction, I was an uncommitted delegate to the Democratic National Convention last year, 2024, for Minnesota. And so that's what we mean when we talk about like the formal structure of the Democratic Party. And historically, the formal structures of the party were a lot more powerful. This is where you kind of think of, there's this image of like the Democratic Party machine, especially in cities like Chicago or New York City. But a lot of that power in what we think of the Democratic Party has been moved out of those structures into other areas. So other things that we can mean when we say the Democratic Party, there are the candidates, the elected officials, the people actually running on the Democratic Party ballot line. And then you have campaign committees, things like the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which works to elect Democrats to the U.S. Senate, the DCCC, which elects Democrats to the U.S. House of Representatives, the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which elects Democrats to state legislatures, the Democratic Governors Association, on and on and on and on. There's probably a dozen more I could list off. And that's where a lot of the money is actually moving in the party. These are the folks who are part of the party apparatus and network who are raising and spending vast sums of money. And this is where party loyalty and maintaining the whip often come to discipline and control our elected officials. Some folks may remember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative from New York, when she was first elected, talking about how she wouldn't do call time to raise money for the DCCC. That's what she meant when she said she wasn't going to pour her money and resources into this aspect of the party. Related to this is the entire ecosystem of consultants and vendors who then will run data for the party, will do advising and handle all of the mail that needs to be sent for a campaign, and give sometimes good advice, oftentimes really bad advice as well. And connected to those as well are the bundlers, the fundraisers, the gatekeepers, those who have a network of 100 people that can call and on the drop of a dime say, we're going to give a max contribution to this committee or this candidate. But also the Democratic Party is a brand. It is an identity of voters. And lastly, the last thing that is the Democratic Party, which isn't actually the Democratic Party, is the ballot line. This is when you have the word Democrat or a D next to a candidate's name when they're running on the ballot. No aspect of the party that I previously listed actually controls who can run as a Democrat in a public election. So through this, you have a great diversity of folks who call themselves Democrats who are running for office, all the way from people like Eric Adams in New York to folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also in New York, and that's a vast political spectrum between them. And importantly, the ballot line is property of the state. It's not property of the party. There are other countries like the United Kingdom, right, where former Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn was expelled out of the party and delisted, and wasn't able to run as a Labor Party candidate in the North Arlington electorate, but he was able to win as an independent candidate. And so to actually address the question I think there are aspects of this that are deeply broken, and I don't see much redemption for them. And particularly, it's around this ecosystem of consultants and vendors and the money and how it moves in the party. When I was a delegate an uncommitted delegate at the DNC last year, we were a group of 30 of us in a convention of 4,700 delegates. And we were the only ones saying, this is not right. This isn't okay. We're making our demands. And we were able to really leverage that position by being on the inside. And so I think that's like the power and the utility of engaging with the formal structures of the party, is that you do have a platform for your politics. And as a socialist, as someone on the left, I've been able to, by interacting with this and not swearing off of it, have been able to multiply, I think, the power and influence, and really push a different narrative of what it means to be a Democrat, from the basis of a socialist or Marxist analysis of economy and labor. The one thing that isn't collapsing, which I think is really important as socialists, as we address this question of what to do about the Democratic Party, one thing that's not collapsing is the brand. It's not good, but there is still vast numbers of people in this country who are committed and loyal Democratic Party voters. And they don't really care what kind of Democrat they're voting for. They just want to defeat Republicans. And I think that is an important opportunity as we push in the electoral realm to understand that there is opposition to fascism. It's not very well organized, but fundamentally, the Democratic Party, however imperfect and broken it may be in some aspects, is still the largest coalition of leftists and labor in this country by far. And I'm not willing to abandon that coalition and leave folks out in the cold out of principle or principled abstentionism to try to build something somewhere else. And I think it's important for us as socialists to follow the leadership of labor. And I'm not just talking about like any old labor union, because you can always find some union here or there that will just like validate priors. But to think about, our more left-wing and progressive unions, and where are they putting their energy and their focus, and it's within the Democratic Party. That isn't to say that there aren't deep problems. There's a long story of idealistic young leftists entering the party, and they're co-opted. They get eaten alive, stripped for parts, tossed out when they don't go along to get along. And I've experienced that myself. The number of folks who were so excited and welcoming to me as a fresh-faced 22-year-old who had a lot of energy to give to the party. And as soon as they saw that I wasn't there to try to build a career, I wasn't there to vote blue no matter who, when candidates are just actively antagonistic towards our values and passing policies that are destructive to our communities, that it is a hard battle. It's a hard fight. And also it's an arena that I'm not willing to leave uncontested. And I think that's the importance of folks on the left, socialists, by both engaging with the party and also the need for parallel institutions and structure to build a different center of political gravity. That's why I'm become more active in DSA in the last few years. And I'm actually currently a member of the steering committee for Twin Cities DSA. And fundamentally, I think there's not just like the sudden socialist revolution simmering, ready to explode at a moment's notice. We have to organize for what we want. And that is a slow, long march through the institutions, I think, and also not letting us get swept up in it, not letting us get distracted, and making sure that we put our values and the movement before personal ambition and before the natural desire as humans we have to be liked and accepted. And it's taken a lot of building that fortitude and building my own network of allies and comrades so that I can walk into a room and know that maybe 90% of them aren't with me and still maintain my composure and slowly build support. Last November, there was an effort to purge me from my party leadership positions. One position I hold is I'm an elected member of the DFL's State Executive Committee. So I'm one of about 15 or so people who hold a title that's considered a state party officer. And I was quoted in an article in a local newspaper of record, the Star Tribune, talking about how Uncommitted as a movement did not endorse Kamala Harris because she gave us literally nothing that we were demanding and asking for. And they try to use that as justification to say, oh, Sam didn't support our candidate and he's disloyal, and so he needs to be kicked out. And that effort to remove me failed pretty spectacularly. There was a vote of the CD5's Congressional District 5 Central Committee, where I'm elected out of. It was by far the best attended meeting that that body had had in at least a decade. It was the first meeting after a devastating election loss. And there were 21 people who voted in favor of removing me and 33 who were opposed. So that's not completely overwhelming, but I cleared 60% of folks who said, we're sticking with Sam. We want him around. We're not going to throw people out and build a smaller, more pure, weaker Democratic Party. And I knew that if I had not been working for years and years and years to build that network of folks, to build that balance, that an effort like that probably would have succeeded. And so I think that the ability to be an open socialist, serving in some of the highest leadership roles in the Democratic Party in Minnesota is possible because we have put in the work over 6, 7, 8 years to build our own kind of parallel institution even within the party. That isn't to say that I think that that is where the magic is. In fact, I'm constantly learning from and being challenged by and adapting to the critiques and strategies of folks on the outside of the party who are building their own parties, who see electoral politics to be a complete dead end. And I think it's necessary to have a strategy that is compatible with both the inside and outside, an inside-outside strategy. Because there isn't one single answer to this. It's more about a movement and building the consciousness of working class Americans. And in the process, what we can accomplish is to continue to educate and organize everyday working class Americans, and also make sure that there are folks in place in the Democratic Party so that there's constant pressure on the inside to not take these folks for granted in elections, and understanding that in order for Democrats to win locally and nationally, that there's no path to victory without seeing the left as a fundamental part of that coalition, which needs to be heard out and have their preferences and policies incorporated into the platform and message of Democratic Party candidates. Last thing I'll mention is again on this question of, is it collapsed or is it broken? In some degree, like just working off the premise of yes, that's the case being the answer. That the potential like phoenix that can rise out of the flames is labor. It's organized labor, keeping the focus on economics in particular, and not letting the Democratic Party be totally controlled by these really shallow identity politics arguments and reasoning, which are just it's not working. And I say that as someone who is a queer person who has agitated for LGBTQ rights and really been pushed hard to change the culture of the party, and even just normalizing things like sharing pronouns and introductions. And I know that's not for everyone, and I don't think that's the key that unlocks the treasure chest. I think it's labor, and so I still have a lot to learn, especially on understanding and organized labor. I'm not a member of a union myself. And yeah, fundamentally, if you want it, you got to build it, whether it's within the party or outside the party.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to, stick in the electoral arena for a minute, but I want to kind of interject with one more question, kind of in a different direction. Some of us on this call were working in so-called third party campaigns for this last presidential election. I was working on the Cornel West campaign here in Minneapolis, and Tracy, Carson, you were working on the same campaign down in Indiana. I'm not going to shy away. Third parties didn't really deliver much. They didn't really have a great showing this time around. The showing was nothing special compared to previous elections. There was no huge upsurge in showing for third parties in from what I can tell. Is it actually third parties that we should be turning away from? Is it are third parties kind of a lost cause? What's your take on that, Tracy?
I want to kind of answer the first question to get to the
go ahead
second.
With both of you. Yeah.
Is the Democratic Party collapsing? Yes. Is it redeemable? No.
That's clear.
And to be honest, I don't like the term people of color. I'm just Black. That's what I am. That's just me. If you want to refer to me as person of color, I just may cringe a little bit. So just keep that in mind. But I'm just done with the Democratic Party. I always say the Republican Party tells me exactly who they are. They tell me they don't want me to vote. They tell me they don't want me to have rights. They tell me exactly who they are. They're terrible,
right,
but I know what they're going to do. They wrote a thing called Project 2025, and the Democrats literally just used it as a fear-mongering tactic, but didn't think, oh, we should just have a plan. That would be common sense. Somebody writes a plan, you're against it, so you say you're going to do this. This party consistently does not take steps to address our concerns, especially Black Americans. Black Americans have supported Democrats literally without question until this election. And I think the reason was very, very clear. The economy is terrible. I don't care what the stock market says. I don't care what unemployment numbers that can be manipulated, since the economy is terrible. And it affects, I never can remember the difference, but it affects Black Americans disproportionately. We're the last hired, first fired. We don't get opportunities for starting our businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So personally, I hope the Democratic Party just self-destructs. That's my goal in life. Tear it down, burn it up, because it's not redeemable. Any party that takes money from AIPAC, you can just miss me with it. Unless they just miraculously said, we're not taking any more corporate money, which that's never going to happen. But it would take something like that for me to say, you know what, I might vote for a Democrat. I won't now, because they take money from AIPAC, the pharmaceutical lobbies, and they're okay with it. And I'm not okay with that. I can't be okay with a party that tells me it's not your turn. We can put that issue aside. Issues like reparations have been put aside for at least the past 40 years. Now is not the time has always been the answer. And I could say several issues where the Democratic Party has told its leftist activists now is not the time. And it gets to a point where I'm just like, I can't listen to this. So I kind of went over to third parties. I think there was a couple of things in this election that why third parties did not do well. Number one, 95 million Americans said no, and they stayed home. That's probably the largest factor in why third parties did not do well. Because if you look at polls, nobody wanted Trump and Biden, and nobody really wanted Harris versus Trump. So they just said, you know what, I'm going to stay home. I think that's a big factor about why third parties didn't do well. Another factor, I think, is that a lot of people got scared. A lot of people got scared of the propaganda that the mainstream, or what I call lamestream media, puts. That if you put by voting third party, you're actually voting for Trump, which is the silliest thing I've ever heard. And so they voted for Harris because they were so fearful of Trump. And I'm going to challenge people. Like, why would you do that? You know that the Harris campaign said they're going to give Israel everything that they need. They had a plan for a ceasefire in May, couldn't get it done. And they want me to believe that they care about Palestinians, and I haven't seen it demonstrated. You know, that was going to continue. They're going to continue to give money to Israel. We already know what Trump's going to do. Easily, we know what they're going to do. But I think the media did not to give them props, but they did a very good job in scaring people of Trump. And I think a large portion of third-party voters said, you know what, it's not our time yet. And somehow we've got to attack that. So that's what I think in general. I could go on with how I think Democrats just sit by. You know, they said, oh, we're gonna resist Trump. And they resisted by confirming all his nominees so far.
Yeah.
Like every nominee he's put up, they voted for. There hasn't been a pushback. I think it's intentional, but that's just me. So that's pretty much what I think.
Well, it's fair. Yeah, we don't have another, I was going to kind of open it up, but Penelope, you haven't had a chance to come in on the kind of first couple of questions. What are your thoughts on both of those pieces?
Brief. I mean, I'll be brief. I mean, as far as whether it's damaged, I would say if the Democratic Party now were a car, you would be standing there with your mechanic and your insurance agent debating whether to junk it and just get a new one, or whether to put a whole lot of money into it and not even be sure it'll ever run properly again or be the same again. I think it definitely is severely damaged. And I think, and it's not, for the reasons that some of the commentators are saying, it's not because Kamala Harris wasn't a good speaker or Tim Walz isn't, photogenic, or I don't know what the heck they're saying. I think basically if you look back and you think if you gave the average worker out there, black or white or Hispanic or whatever, working class person, the elevator exercise. I used to do market research, all right? So there's an elevator exercise where you say to someone, here's a new product, and you give them a product description. Now you're with a colleague in the elevator going to the top floor of your building. What do you say to this person just in the time you're in the elevator to convince them to explain what this product is and convince them it's good? If you gave that exercise to working men and women out there about the Democratic Party and you went back to the year 1955, 60, they would say, well, it's the party of the workers. It's the union party. It's my party because I'm a blue collar person. I'm an auto worker. I'm a teamster. I'm a waitress. I clean houses for a living. It's my party, not the Republicans. They're the people I clean houses for. Now, I don't know what people would say. I don't know that you can even really get the brand I mean, Samuel talked about the brand, but what is the brand? I mean, I think people are very confused and conflicted. Well, it's sort of the brand of, and I do use the phrase people of color. Apologies, Tracy, just because it's quicker to me than saying blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Middle Eastern people. I mean, but of, people, blue collar people of all types, let's say, working people, poor people, oppressed people, recent immigrants, etc. I don't know that anyone would say that now. I think it's to me so depressing that Teamster went there and endorsed Trump and stood up, in front of the heavens and everybody. I mean, that the Teamster, Hoffa was rolling in his grave for that, I think. I mean, that, and my father would have been rolling in his grave. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, and in terms of the third party thing, I don't know. I feel very mixed about the whole thing of like, let's junk the Democrats and let's, go to third parties. I think most of the Democratic faithfuls, and I see it here in Winona, who worked on the Harris campaign are feeling bruised and depressed. But in 4 years, or even in 2 years, when the next congressional comes up, they'll be up there, they'll sort of lick their wounds and they'll be working and it'll resurrect. I don't know how enthusiastic it'll be, but it'll be out there. So people will be able to have that as a choice. Third parties, I just, it's a nice idea for a European country. I don't know in this country if it's really practical. I just don't, because I don't, every time I've seen, and I've looked at the history of many third party, efforts over the many years of going back to the socialists and people like Eugene Debs and everything else, it's always a kind of embattled small thing that has a lot of good ideas, but doesn't really make a dent. People in this country are just, like it or not, I think are very saturated from, early in life on with this two-party system thing. And, so maybe we need to try and think of some way. I have basically all the same issues with the Democrats as what Tracy expressed in terms of Palestine, in terms of Black people, in terms of a lot of other issues. And yet I just don't know whether another party really can make enough of a showing to be, realistic. And there is the issue too of big donors. And there's the issue of the fact that if you even did get someone close enough to getting a presidential, bid as a third party person, I just think they'd get totally frozen out. I don't know that they, the networks behind the scenes or something that, really control a lot of what goes on in Washington we don't even know about, and people we certainly don't elect. And so I just fear that they wouldn't be able to really fight that.
Yeah, it sounds like, that's a debate, but it seems like there's a lot of agreement. And I think Tracy wants to give some more thoughts.
Okay, so here comes the disagreement. I disagree with what Penelope's saying about the third parties. And here's why. I understand where you're going in terms of can third parties make a difference, but keep this in mind. There are actual third party candidates that hold offices locally.
Oh, right. I know that.
Now, in terms of president, that's a different challenge, right? Because you got to overcome media, you got to overcome all this, but essentially, it can be done. It's harder, when the corporations unite and form what I call evil Megatron. They can do that. But here's the thing that I think we're forgetting. People are actually frustrated with our government. Mm-hmm. And third parties, which I absolutely think should exist, need to do a better job of saying, look at asking potential voters, hey, what has the party done? And that's when, I left the Democratic Party because I had always voted Democrat, mm-hmm. except for when I voted for Ralph Nader. Mm-hmm. But I had to start asking myself, what have they done besides the Civil Rights Act, besides the Voters' Rights Act? What has the Democratic Party done that will specifically benefit me? And those are the conversations that I have with people, it's like, look at what they've done for you. Are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? And the answer is no. Thanks to terrible Trump, tariffs are going to happen. A lot of his voters are going to wake up and realize, oh, we made the wrong decision. I don't think Harris was the right decision. I think she was a terrible candidate. Her loss had nothing to do with sexism or racism, which is what the Democratic Party wants to go to. It had a lot to do with immigration and the economy. It's always the economy. How much money do I have in my pocket? It will always be the economy. And when you don't speak to that and you don't offer a plan for that, it's easy to lose. I think what third parties can do is offer a better plan. We just have to mobilize our volunteers. It's a hard fight. Trust and believe. I live in Indiana and we had to beg people to sign. And they were like, no, you're just giving the election to Trump, which is a false narrative that the Democratic Party perpetuates. That if you vote for a third party, you're actually voting for Trump. Wrong. When I vote for Dr. Cornel West, I'm voting for Dr. Cornel West. That's who I'm voting for. But the two parties, well, I keep saying two parties, but they're really one party. They're just two sides of the same coin. I literally can't think. Now, maybe on abortion, they're different, but I don't literally, with that issue, I don't think Democrats want to codify abortion, and I don't think Republicans want to ban it. I think they just used it for a fundraising type of opportunity. But if you look at the way Congress votes, that's where we need to start pointing out. I'm like, look, they vote to increase the military's budget, both Democrats and Republicans. They vote to have the government spy on you. They both vote to increase your taxes. And I think we need to do a better job. So when I hear a statement like that, and I know, Penelope, you didn't probably mean it this way, I hear, well, we're the Democrats and we're perfect, or we're elite and you're not. And I'm like, I can't rock with that statement. I just can't. I get where you're going, but I just can't rock with that statement because I see where we really actually are. And I think it's a change. That needs to happen. I think I look at other countries where they have 5 and 6 parties and they have their elections just fine, perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I look at, the debates. That's another issue. Why not debate a third party candidate? If you say that you're the best candidate, you should just be able to debate them. Just have a debate, have the top 5 candidates, no matter what party they are from, have it on TV, and there you go. But because the two parties are really one party, they say, oh, no, we don't want third parties because they're forcing a choice, and we have to unforce this choice. And so we're going to have to engage person to person. Like I said, it's a hard road. We shouldn't have to take it. But that's what we're faced with.
Yeah, I have another question too, but I have Samuel's hand is raised, so go ahead.
Yeah, Penelope and Tracy, really appreciate the critiques and criticism you're laying forth. I think one aspect that, and this is why I'm in the Democratic Party, why I consider myself a Democrat, and it's why we have a two-party system, is about the nature and structure of our electoral system. We have a first past the post system where whatever single candidate gets the most votes in a congressional district wins that election, whether they win with 34% or 80%, if the vote is split across three parties or candidates. The tendency of first past the post systems or winner take all systems, it's called like Duverger's law. I think that's how it's called, or Duverger's law. And this is seen in countries all over the world that there's a tendency, it's not necessarily this way, but a tendency towards the electorate agglomerating into two distinct parties. And I think if we want to see the success of third parties, and I very much want to see the success of third parties, is that we need to address the structure of our democracy, if you even want to call it that, but the structure of our electoral system. This is why I'm very much care about ranked choice voting as an option. We've seen a growth of that in Minnesota. That's what we use for city elections here in Minneapolis, and a number of municipalities have adopted this as well. But also proportional voting as a system. And countries that have ranked choice voting or proportional voting systems, they may still be mostly a two-party system, but you at least have representation and the ability for third-party candidates to win elections and have representation in parliaments and legislative bodies. And often they are able to be the difference between one of the major parties being a minority government or having a majority of the chamber. I think one critique that I have of the push for third parties is that often it feels, from my perspective, like these are moonshot campaigns. Where particularly the Green Party doesn't put a lot of energy or resources into building its local structures and winning local elections and building up from there, but rather it is going for the presidency and the presidency alone, which even if we got to a situation like was mentioned previously where they were elected, well, they don't have anyone in Congress to back up and move their agenda through the legislative branch. I would challenge the conception that Democrats don't do anything, though, or anything good, and this varies state by state. And I think Minnesota is a fairly unique situation. But in Minnesota, our state legislators, after the fall of Roe, we codified abortion in state statute. And this act, it was called the PRO Act, Protecting Reproductive something, PRO. And that legislation was authored and carried by a socialist Democrat, Jen McEwen, in the state Senate, elected out of Duluth. She was endorsed by the Twin Ports DSA chapter. She's a committed socialist. And our state Senate had a 34-33 Democratic majority. And 3 of those 34 senators were candidates who were endorsed and supported by DSA chapters in the state. And when socialists are the difference between the Democratic Party being a minority party or majority party in legislative bodies, that's really where I think we can flex our power as socialists. And another example is Senator Omar Fateh. He's actually running for mayor now of Minneapolis. He was willing to hold up the rest of the agenda of the Democratic Party through the Minnesota Senate in order to make sure that they passed an ambitious bill regarding how Uber and Lyft and rideshare drivers are paid, to make sure that there's benefits, there's minimum compensation, and that this quote unquote gig economy isn't proliferated to put workers in further drive them to the economic brink and towards insecurity. And then, the Democratic Party really failed in this respect in the last election. One thing as socialists that we talk about a lot, that we care about, is the Green New Deal, right? This package of policies to really transform our economy and address climate change head on. And half of the Green New Deal actually was passed and signed into law. It was just known as the Inflation Reduction Act. It wasn't everything in the Green New Deal, but it was some major components of it. The Democrats did manage to pass and put into law. Now, of course, Trump is doing everything he can to dismantle it. That's a whole nother thing. But I, it's a mixed bag, and the role of big money, corporate money, APAC is so outsized as well, and so I don't fault anyone, especially those who are really strident in their advocacy of third parties on why they've completely turned away from the Democratic Party. I would just submit that it's a mixed bag. It's not totally one thing or the other, and that there is an opportunity for folks on the left to continue pushing the party to get some of what we want, but certainly not everything that we want.
Yeah, Tracy had to drop off the call, has another engagement, but I just wanted to throw out kind of one more question or piece here. I think both people that are on the call now have worked with the Democratic Party in the recent past here. So I'll just ask it this way: if you were making decisions for how the party was operating, in their opposition and their resistance to Trump right now, what would they be doing? If they really were a working class party, if they were, if they're becoming one, or if there's this fight between, certain factions within the Democratic Party, what do you think? What would you recommend, or what do you think they would be doing to challenge Trump right now? Do either of you have specific thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I guess this is a Chinese commie thing, but phrase, so maybe we'd have to think of a better one. I would form some work groups. The Chinese Mao, used to form these work groups, and they would fan out into the countryside and among the people about various issues, whether it was health or women's rights or whatever it was. And so I would form work groups, and I would go out to workplaces and to places where people gather, students, all kinds of people. And I would say, we need to fight what is going on here. We need to fight this right-wing thing that is going on in the country. Do you realize how this is going to affect you? And give them one or two little tidbits. What do you want to, what would you do? What would you join us? If I had, something right here, what would it be that you would say, yes, I'm going to join up on that? And try to sort of gather, I think initially you have to do this spade work. I don't think you could go out and just assume that you're going to snap your fingers and people are going to join your committees or your groups or come to rallies or whatever, because I think people think of the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think they think the brand of the Democrats is, these people that just don't even remember workers exist, don't even remember picket lines, don't remember anything. I mean, that was one thing I liked when I was up in the Twin Cities about the DSA up in the Twin Cities was, they would go out when the UAW was on strike at one point. They actually had a sign-up thing for everybody take a shift, out there. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of stuff people from Democratic committees have to start doing. And, right now they're nurses up in the Twin Cities who are having some sort of a labor action. I'm not up on exactly what the details are. But that's an example, go there and say, hey, nurses aides, lab techs, what do you want the local Dems here to present you with that you would say, yes, I'm going to knock doors for that next time? What would we have to do? And I'll tell you what, I want me to guess as to what most of the things would be in the top. Yeah, housing costs. Housing and rent costs, number one. Nobody can freaking afford a darn here in Winona, which is, I see people on Facebook from Winona begging. I'm a single mother with 3 kids who had to leave an abusive husband. I'm a waitress. Where I can't find rent that I can afford. I'm living with my cousin and it's horrible. There's 10 of us in a room, housing costs, medical care costs, insurance costs. Nobody can afford it. Why did that guy shoot that? What's his name? Because people can't afford health care. Even my son, who is like in a managerial position, has a crap health plan that he says he might as well not even have. That's a sham. It's a sham plan. That's what he calls it. Because basically you would have to be in an ICU for 4 months before the damn thing would even kick in. So his two children who get sore throats and coughs like all other kids and have to go to the dentist every 6 months, they have to pay for that themselves. They might as well not even have this plan. That's the second one. And then things like food prices and utilities and the usual things that people want to do. Plus, how about community college costs and state college costs? The U of M is out of reach for many working people in Minnesota. I had a lady that I used to go to cut my hair who, she and her blue collar husband, her husband, who was raised as a blue collar guy, worked his way through the University of Minnesota years ago. You couldn't do that now unless your work was maybe, in a drug cartel. I mean, there's no way you could, work part-time and go to school part-time. That is a thing of the and working people would like to think, if they work hard, that their child, if they're halfway bright, could get a 4-year degree and better themselves. And the Republicans have somehow managed to pick the slack up here, unfortunately. And I mean, part of the reason is that the big donors behind the Democrats won't let them, I think, or won't let them talk about these issues, the minimum wage, affordable health care, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's a tough one.
Samuel, if the Democrats were doing what they should be doing to counter Trump, what would they be doing?
I would agree with everything Penelope just said. Democrats need to talk about issues and stop it with the snappy slogans and meet people where they're at. There's a reason why so many working people this last election either sat it out or flipped towards the Republicans. And that's because there was a lack of answer by Democrats to these pressing economic issues that Penelope just explained. And so no wonder that working people are looking between these two choices and seeing the Democratic Party touting the amazing stock market and record GDP. That's like a taunt. That's like rubbing it in your face. And unfortunately, right, then voters who are living this look between one party that is taunting them and another party that is simplistically saying we're gonna lower the cost of gas and we're going to drill baby drill. And those are also simplistic slogans, but it at least cuts through the media noise and reaches regular working class Americans. When you're talking about GDP and people aren't seeing in their lives, it just shreds the credibility of the message, and it is disgusting. And so there needs to be that talk about issues. And Penelope, when you were speaking, I wrote this down. You said the word fight, and I underlined it 3 times and wrote yes next to it. Working people want to see a party that is fighting for them, not trying to straddle and play this both sides game between working people and the elite. And I saw it really up close and personal at the DNC last year. We were calling for the Harris campaign and the party through its platform to stop sending weapons and vast billions of dollars of money to Israel. But we also had a much smaller demand to allow a Palestinian American to speak and address the convention. And, we had a list of speakers, options to choose from, and they said no. And what I learned was that behind the scenes is that AIPAC had made an 8-figure donation, somewhere between $10 and $99 million, contingent on simply not allowing anyone of Palestinian origin to speak on that stage in Chicago. And that's the decisions being made by folks at the highest level of the party. And if only out of self-preservation, Democrats need to understand that this is a corrupt bargain. You can't have both. And if you want to win elections out of pure selfishness and greed for the survival of your own career and brand, then you need to get right on this stuff. You have to, because Democrats have lost the narrative just completely. And maybe, we'll see a little bit of renewed fight now that Trump is in the White House. But we're not seeing it a lot so far. I've been incredibly disappointed. And even among other very loyal Democratic voters, folks who have been involved in various ways in the party, a lot of them are pissed off and angry. I mean, even one of my friends, and we go back and forth, we like to argue, she's very much a centrist, and I'm a socialist. And we even agree on this, that the party has just lost the plot. And in that respect, I don't want to say I have hope, because hope feels like this very passive thing, but I hope that it can be translated into courage to do the right thing, even in the face of obstacles. And part of that, of course, going back to what I said earlier on in this discussion, is about flushing out, cutting ties with, firing these consultants, these vendors who have just completely led us astray with their fancy charts and polling that are just being used to justify the status quo of accepting billions of dollars from corrupt interests, rather than what I think was, I think Bernie Sanders had flaws, certainly, but he showed that there could be a viable presidential campaign built on a broad base of small dollar donors. And of course, the DNC did everything that they could to kneecap him, and unfortunately it worked. But I think that a strong, principled campaign that is at the national level could be a thing that does knit together leftists and progressives who really diverge on this question of the Democratic Party, but that we could unite behind a principled series of ideas that is really premised on not being corrupted by this money and by this system. So I don't rest my laurels on hope alone, but I think courage is what is needed. And if there are those in high positions and high places that can see that being courageous doesn't mean being destroyed, we might be able to get somewhere. But I won't bullshit you and tell you that, like, oh, if you just vote blue, no matter who, things looking better, because that's what got us into this mess.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when you were talking about the economy and how people, can see that it's not good, and how just pretending everything's great isn't working. I had Tom Goodkind on my program this last time. He's with Liberation Road, and he was doing some calling for the campaigns and stuff too. And he said he spoke to this. I think he wasn't in where he lives, but he was down south somewhere, and he was speaking to this white woman on the phone, and she just said, why is Harris always smiling? Nothing is funny. Like, there's nothing funny going on. There's nothing happy going on in my life right now. Yeah. And she was going to vote for Trump. And I think that kind of encapsulates this, this mismatching or completely missing of narratives. Is there anything else that anybody else that either of you want to share? I think I'm going to wrap it up. I don't think anybody else is going to be getting on. Is there any other thoughts on,
I would just say one other.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Just add one other thing, Nick, which I should have said earlier, or someone should have, which is, don't underestimate too the degree to which racism and sexism did enter into things. Election, because, and I know, like, people will say, well, but Obama got elected and he's a person of color, he's black, for Tracy, black, he's a black guy, he's got a black wife, he's got 2 black children. That's true, but number one, he's a man, and number two, I think that there was a backlash because of his being elected. I think, I remember an article when he was in power. I don't know if it was his first, probably was his first 4 years, of some white people in the Midwest somewhere who incredibly hilariously said something in the course of this interview that now that Obama was in the White House, there was nothing on television except black people. Now, I am not making this up. And I remember saying to my husband, what in the hell are they talking about? And he said, it's ridiculous. They're so racist that they see one black person in a toothpaste commercial. And to them, that means they change the channel right away. And that means there's nothing on TV but black people because there's a black guy in the White House. Somehow he's engineered this or something. I mean, it was the most ludicrous thing, but I really think there was a certain amount of backlash, and it sort of bubbled up. It was kind of held down when Biden was in, but I think it sort of had bubbled up in a big way, in a very toxic way after that. And that certainly was an issue. And so, definitely whatever we do now, like when I say we, I mean, those of us who want to fight against this right-wing crap that's going on, this creep towards fascism, whatever you want to call it, we have to be prepared to hit that like right solidly on the nose, metaphorically, because we can't. I mean, we have to make sure that anti-racism, and anti-homophobia and all that stuff is a part of what we're doing, because that is a big part of that Project 2025 anyway. So if you're going to rally around that, against that, you have to address it anyway. But for sure, let's not let anyone get away with that, I guess, would be my thing.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate the discussion, and I'm planning to have more of these debates and discussions in the future. I think I might even have another one specifically on what's the Democratic Party doing, where's it going. I really appreciate the time on a Saturday, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Nick. And hey, if I could
butt
in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, finish up. Yeah.
Just 100 plus to everything Penelope was just saying, and I want to leave listeners with a call to action. And my call to action isn't get involved in the Democratic Party. I think for those who are interested in that and they can see themselves in that, do it. But do something. Do not be discouraged. It's really easy in the shock and awe of the Trump administration to just become despondent. And I want to challenge folks that you will find hope and vision and community and purpose by getting involved, whether it's in a labor union, whether it is getting involved in immigrants' rights movement, whether it is organizing in your workplace, whether it is changing your spending habits, which isn't organizing, but it's an action that a lot of folks can take to buy and shop local, support entrepreneurs who are Black, who are Indigenous, to stop giving our money willingly to these corrupt forces which are destroying this country, and that there is something for you. Look up locally who is in your community, get involved with the group. It doesn't have to be a big group, whether it's 5 people, small organization of 30 folks. But now is no time to sit back and watch it all happen. And the future is made by us. The state of the Democratic Party, however broken it is, it will continue, like the party will continue to exist, and for its own survival, it will have to adapt and respond. And we create the conditions and the political narrative ourselves, as activists, as organizers, on the left. And so I just want to leave folks with that call to action that now is the time, if you've been on the sidelines, or even if you've been very involved for years and years and years, to think about what is within your power and reach and control and get to work.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you so much. And you two take care.
Take care.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's our debate. Thanks for tuning in.